Thank you everyone for joining. I think we're going to give folks about another 30 seconds before we get started. I think we can get started. Thank you everyone for joining today's Caring for the Caregiver webinar. My name is Molly Evans. I am the Senior Programs Manager at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs, and I have the honor and the privilege of planning this webinar series each month. Today's webinar is very special because of who we have joining us. We have Susan Doughty, who's the caregiver specialist at SeniorCare and has been working with caregivers for over 20 years. Susan, the name might sound familiar, the face might look familiar because she is familiar. She's presented at several of these webinars in the past, including one in 2022, where she wrote out 4 common scenarios that a dementia caregiver might experience and actually acted them out. And I've been receiving positive feedback on that webinar for years. So Susan has been a welcome guest in the series, and we'll miss her terribly. Susan, I buried the lead. Susan is retiring next week, which is very bittersweet for all of us who've had the chance to work with her and benefit really from her experience, her warmth, and her wisdom. And when I heard that she was retiring and I asked her if she had any thoughts on a final webinar, she had a lot of great ideas and a lot of sort of parting words of wisdom and advice and stories to share for family caregivers from her years working with them and with you. So really honored and thrilled that she's able to join us here today. I'll just end with a few logistical reminders. Live transcription is available at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit questions either through the chat or through the Q&A. Through the Q&A, you can do so anonymously, and we will have time at the end for questions with you all. So with that, I would like to invite Susan to turn on her camera. There she is. And I'll turn it over to her. Thanks, Susan.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Some people retire and leave a bunch of office plants behind, and I'd like to leave some scenarios that keep reoccurring for caregivers, things that have helped change the course of their self-care and their ability to provide for their care recipients. Some reoccurring themes in story form. Okay. So one thing that's really helpful for caregivers to know how to do some breath work. It's very simple. Slow, deep breathing, count in to 4, hold it for 2 or 3, whatever's comfortable, and try to breathe out for 4 too. As you're counting, it short circuits any anxiety. It helps you to relax. Very simple to do. You can do it in line at Home Depot. So breathing is very important. Just do slow, deep breaths. Your body will automatically relax. The more you do it, the quicker your body relaxes. So the other thing is visualization that has helped a lot of caregivers. The visualization is, I'll say, sitting by the ocean, for those that enjoy that, wherever your place is, in the woods, in your yard, wherever your comfortable place is, your relaxing place. So if you were by the ocean, you would sit comfortably, you would do your deep breaths, and you would just take in the sight. You would take in the ocean, the sand, the seagulls, whatever. You would also have to feel like what's in the air. Do I feel, salt air? Do I smell it? What does the sky look like? Take in as much as the outside environment as you can. Your body will relax. So that's all visualization is. You do the deep breathing and you think of a place where you were very relaxed, maybe on vacation, in your backyard, and your body will respond to that. These 2 things have helped a lot of caregivers. I want to share a story about a fellow. He was 89 years old. He was caring for his wife. He was complaining that he wakes up every morning at 3:30 or 4. He's anxious, like, what do I have to do today? What do I have to do today with caregiving? So I offered to teach him visualization and deep breathing, and his response was, my generation doesn't do that stuff. I've been breathing my whole life for 89 years. I said, okay, if you change your mind. He did call me weeks later. He was exhausted. I taught him some visualization and deep breathing. It took minutes. He called me a few weeks later to thank me, to say that I gave him 3 more hours, sometimes 4 more hours to his day. Of course, he fought me on it for a long time, but that's a success story. So he fit visualization and breathing into his life as a caregiver, and it made a huge difference. I mean, think if we had 3 or 4 more hours every day. So, and he used an example that was kind of cute. He said, I talked to him about adapting, and he used an example that was cute. He said, it's kind of like if you don't want to, shift and adapt and try something new, it's kind of like trying to fit your size 10 foot in a size 2 shoe, right? It's going to hurt. It's not going to work for you. I thought that was adorable. But anyway, I'd like to move on now to connections. Connections are really important. And why is there a cartoon up there? And why am I so talented of an artist? Okay, antidepressants. There's a fish and it says 29 cents. There is some goldfish you can buy for 29 cents. And there was a woman who would not get out of bed. She was very depressed. She had no reason to get out of bed. People were working with her to help her. A neighbor was moving and left a bowl with a goldfish in it. She brought it into her house, put it on the end table. She realized she had to feed it. She started getting up in the morning to feed it. She was going to get rid of it. And then she started sitting when she would feed the fish and watching TV. Then when I saw her next and heard she was getting out of bed, I wanted to know what she was doing so I could use that information to maybe help others. And she told me that she had to get up. I forget the name of the fish, but she had to get up to feed the fish. And the fish actually likes to watch certain programs with her. Some people might have let that go, but I asked her, I said, well, how do you know it likes certain programs on? She said, when Oprah comes on, it swims like crazy. It really likes it. It has special programs it likes. All I know is this one connection to a 29-cent goldfish really helped this woman get out of bed, have a purpose, have company. Of course, she went downstairs in the building and started telling everybody about her fish. So this also brought in more socializing. So that's one of my favorite stories. It's about connections. I have 2 others that were really special, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. When I was doing a bereavement group, there was this one man that was in the group. He had lost his wife of 70-something years. And people in the group would cry from time to time for their losses. And he said he was never allowed to cry as a little boy. It showed weakness. Men don't cry. I don't understand parents that think a 5-year-old is a man, but anyway, he could never cry, even when he lost his beloved wife. And people asked him, well, do you have any family? Do you have any other family? He says, I only have a brother. He's in Florida. We don't speak. We can't stand each other. And someone said, why? He says, I have no idea why. My parents just kind of put us against each other and we never got along. He was encouraged to call his brother because it's important to have people in your life going through caregiving. They were both crying on the phone. The whole room was crying when he was telling the story the next week. They were both crying on the phone, saying they didn't know why they hated each other. The brother said, I'm sending you a ticket, a plane ticket. You come down here and visit me in Florida. We both lost our wives. We need each other. He went down to visit him. And another thing, he had said he always wanted a dog growing up, and there were no pets. Parents wouldn't allow any pets. I forgot that part. So he went down to see his brother. They had a wonderful visit. His brother took him to some place in Florida where they had dogs, and he got a puppy. He came back to the group the next week. He was smiling. He had something in his jacket no one could see. It was a puppy he brought to the group. And he was crying when he was telling the story, and the whole room cheered because he opened up. He became someone different. He was able to adapt. And that was one of my favorite stories because the brother called him and said, I just bought the condo next door to me here in Florida. It's for you whenever you want to come. He ended up moving down there. So this is an idea of like when people hold on to anger or little feuds, or, you might want to try to reach out, at least forgive someone, because as a caregiver, you don't need to hang on to all that heaviness of being angry at someone. Whether you're with them or not, you can still let go of those things. Okay, another one is, probably a lot of you are familiar with Atul Gawande. He wrote Being Mortal. He's one of the greatest stories. He was a doctor in the Boston area, and he went into a nursing home, one of his first jobs, and he saw that the people were kind of quiet, not interacting much. And he went to the board and he said, I want to find ideas to help these people communicate and interact. And he said, I was thinking a lot of places have, a resident therapy dog, and a lot of nursing homes have cats. And I'm thinking there's 2 floors here. Let's get, 2 dogs, 2 cats for each floor and 1 dog for each floor. And then I want to get everybody a cage of their own, a small cage, and 2 parakeets each. So I'd like to order 104 parakeets, 4 cats, and 2 dogs. Of course, the board was not excited about this, and the comments were, oh, you're new, this is how it is in a nursing home, et cetera, et cetera. He wouldn't relent. Finally, they got to the point where it's like, get them, just get rid of them when it doesn't work. Everybody had a cage with 2 little parakeets each. People came out of their rooms. They were competing. Well, my bird's almost talking. Well, my bird calls me in the morning. Well, mine comes on my hand. They all started collecting together and talking, and oh, you want to go watch the ball game? It just opened the place up. It was so warm, and that just, you don't have to get 104 parakeets, but think about a pet. There's countless studies that show the longevity, the lower depression, other types of things. It really makes a difference. What had surprised me years back, people that would go to neurologists because there were memory issues with their loved one. And they'd come back and say, you know what the neurologist said? They said to get a dog. And the caregiver said, I got enough to do. Well, several of them did. They got small lap dog breeds. Get the right dog that's going to want to lay in your lap all day. Anyway, it was amazing, the feedback I've gotten from, caregivers. The dog sits with them all day. They pat it. If they get agitated, they say, here's your pup. And several caregivers have said it's worked so well with their care recipient. So don't neglect the possibility of the animal world helping you out, no matter what that is. Okay, so the other part I'd like to talk about, the sister-in-law in the apartment, going down. I just want to remind you about that. That was a real important one. There was a caregiver of her husband with dementia. She had a sister-in-law down the hallway. This is a real important one. I want it to sink in. So she was angry at her, very angry at her. And she goes down, she talked to her. The sister-in-law always wanted to help, but neither one could communicate. So just remember this situation. She ended up helping all the time. Don't be afraid to ask someone. Don't be afraid to reach out and be specific. When people say, let me know if I can help. Well, that's pretty abstract. What does that mean? Say to someone, can you come down on Tuesday so I can go to the Council on Aging and do my group I used to do, sewing or playing pool or whatever? Can you bring a meal once a week? What night can you do that? Be specific. So many caregivers thought they were alone or didn't have as much help as they could have because they didn't ask specific questions. You find out who's going to be there for you and who isn't. It's like when you go to a wake or something, let me know if I can help. Well, a lot of people mean it. That's too abstract. Say specifically, I'd like to go to this, once a week. I'd like to go to this. Just keep that in mind to be specific about what you ask. Touch is very, very important. Sometimes people are agitated and all you do is just give them a hug. Works wonders. Now I'd like to move on to letting go. This is huge. Another skilled piece. Let go or be dragged. Okay, letting go. Let go or be dragged. What do we hold on to? Lots of times caregivers are holding on to things they're frustrated about, they're angry about, but mostly, I'm going to keep my house the way I've always kept it. I'm going to drive that distance because I've always done it. You know, they're not letting go of this. One particular fellow, I'll never forget, he was not going to use a cane. The doctor recommended it, the neurologist recommended it. He said he wasn't going to use a cane because it would make him look old. He was 91, I think, early 90s. He wasn't going to use a cane. He had 9 falls, 9. Most of them, he was in the hospital. Then he said he was ready to use a cane. Well, he couldn't use a cane. He needed a walker then. This is a really important thing. That man had used a cane, most likely would have been fine with the cane for quite a while. But because he held on and he couldn't let go, he exacerbated his situation. The other thing is Language of Letting Go is an excellent book that has been given to many, many caregivers. It has daily devotions. It's a wonderful book. It really helps people in little bite-sized pieces, because I know caregivers are so busy. If you say, oh, read this book, it's like, yeah, I have time to read a book. I was just thinking that. But anyway, daily devotions that teach people what to let go of, physically, environmentally, emotionally. Environmentally, you know, I want my yard to look perfect. I want my house to be the way I always kept it. No, I'm going to carry that big thing of laundry down the stairs and up the stairs, you know, rather than waiting for someone to help you. These things are going to cause more problems for you in the long run. They're going to possibly take away some of your independence. So when caregivers and care recipients think they're hanging on to their independence by not using that cane, they're literally taking away some of their independence. So and just in general, taking care of yourself, you know, as a caregiver, try to list things that nurture you. If you can't list 10 things at least that nurture you, sitting out in the yard with my coffee, taking a walk, you know, having lunch with a friend, sitting and reading my book, going down the Council on Aging. If you can't list 10 things, you're not taking care of yourself, you're neglecting yourself. And what we do is we do denial. I'm fine, I got all this to do, I'm just going to do what I have to do. You put your head down, take care of your care recipient, do what you can. And then all of a sudden, your stomach doesn't feel too good. You might have a headache, you can't sleep through the night or fall asleep. You know, all of a sudden I'm having trouble concentrating. You know, what was I doing? Did I pay that bill? Oh no, am I getting a memory thing like them? I hear this all the time. Check in with yourself. I know, like with the fellow I talked about in the beginning, you know, my generation didn't do that, you know, self-care and breath work and visualization. I know it's kind of like that, but caregiving is not a regular, normal situation, especially when it's more severe, like caring for someone with memory issues or serious physical issues. So just keep in mind, when things are out of the box, caregiving, we think out of the box. So if we've never done the meditation or visualization, that's out of the box. It's time to fight fire with fire, so to speak. So you want to think of things like that. Journaling. I know when someone first said, keep a journal, I'm like, yeah, writing a book, how's that going to make a difference? Believe me, your feelings will come right out eventually, once you get over the hump of making fun of it. One woman keeps a gratitude journal. She said it literally pulled her out of her hopelessness, caring for her husband with dementia, because she started writing all the things she's grateful for. There is a study that shows gratitude short circuits a lot of negative feelings. So what else? Oh, the study. One quick study I want to share. There was a study, it was the heart study. A lot of the Boston hospitals did it. They studied every state, levels of levels of diabetes, levels of all kinds of heart conditions. So the graph kind of went like this. Every state was within a short few bleeps of each other. There was one state way, way down here. And they said, how can they not have heart disease and diabetes like the average of all the other states? They went to visit. They said, we're going to go there. It's going to be a bunch of people in spandex that all jog, right? So they went there. The levels of obesity were the exact same as every other state. Some of the diets were horrendous, like a lot of the other states. What they found was connectedness. It trumped heart disease and diabetes and some of the other things that you're prone to. One separate state. They were all connected. They all cared for each other. It was like a Hallmark movie where everybody does everything for you. Okay, so I want to say there's a lot more we could talk about. Check in with yourself. Take care of you. Sit for 5 minutes as a caregiver and say, what worked today and what didn't? What do I need to change? Okay. I think I could go on. A lot of years of working with caregivers, but those are the main things that stick out. If you can adopt some of those things, caregivers, even if you're not a caregiver, just to take care of yourself, you don't know when you might be. Please take care of yourself. Take a moment to check in with yourself. And I thank you for listening. And if there are any questions, shoot. Molly, you're muted.
So sorry. Thank you, Susan. That was wonderful. We do have a few questions for you. So the first is from the Q&A, was the heart steady state Hawaii? Do you recall what state this was?
Sorry, I don't know. I absorb all this stuff, but there's just so much room up there. I'm sure you can Google it.
Okay. You know what we can do? We can put it in the notes of the webinar recording. So if you go to the the webinar series page on YouTube, you'll see all of the past recordings, and in the notes for today's recording, we'll link to the study. The other question, and I will say, if anyone else has questions or thoughts for Susan, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A now. Susan, you had mentioned the study about, or not the study, the story about the individual who refused to use the cane and kept falling. Mm-hmm. What would be your advice to a caregiver who was caring for this gentleman that you mentioned, for example?
Someone who's resistant in general, you mean? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, lots of times I don't make it personal. I don't say, if you don't use the cane, you bring it to like, oh, there was a fellow that, this happened to, and I use a story that isn't too close to them. So they don't feel like I'm attacking them or criticizing them or anything. So you just use another story, this is what happened to someone, and they don't get defensive about it because it was someone else. But, and you just hope it kind of sinks in, and I just say, some people, some other caregivers, not you, of course, I don't say that part, but I say some caregivers, they hold on so tightly to keeping things the same way they don't even have the same choices that they used to have because something happens. Like that man I told you about, he had a choice for just a cane, and because he held on so tightly to, no, I'm going to keep, this way, I'm independent, he actually lost some of his independence. So I use someone else so they don't take it personally.
Okay. That's great. Okay. Those were the only 2 questions, unless anyone else has any. So I think and I didn't even change this to the Q&A. So I think I speak for everyone in saying thank you for your years of service and your expertise. We're going to miss you. We look forward to seeing what you do next. So thank you.
Not everybody can say they love their job. So I do love my job. And I'll just put in a plug. The artwork can be purchased. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Susan, and thank you everyone for joining and taking this time for yourself. We will take about the next webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And there will be a survey when we close out the webinar, please provide your feedback and your recommendations and your requests for future topics and speakers. So
Thank you. Take care.
Have a
God bless.
good day.